Half-a-day students, I am Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. You all have been through a year of big changes. We've had to adapt and make big changes to keep our families and our island safe. But with change comes opportunity and a chance to try new things like PBS University. While Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio and I will continue to do our part to keep our island safe, you students have a part to play as well. Your part is to keep learning and to keep up with your lessons. That's why I am happy to see you here ready to learn with PBS University. PBS University is a way to bring a continuous educational curriculum to you while you stay safe at home during this time. To help you keep up with your studies, we asked our friends at PBS Guam and the Guam Department of Education to put together this episode. Thank you for doing your part and have a great lesson.
Living in Guam, you've likely spent a good amount of time along the shoreline. You may have dipped your toes into the water at a sandy beach or watched your steps along some jagged rocks. But one environment not as frequently encountered is the muddy wetland. You can find this thick mud around mangrove trees. Guam is home to the Marianas Islands' largest area of mangroves, mostly located in Sasa Bay Marine Preserve. Why are mangrove areas so muddy, and why is that mud actually great for wildlife? Tune into this episode of PBS University as we explore the biology of the mighty mangrove and muddy wetland. Mangroves are trees found only in the tropical intertidal environment. The term intertidal refers to the area between low and high tide. Unlike most trees, mangroves are able to live in salty conditions. Let's walk along this mangrove shoreline. Did you notice a lot of the mud under my boot was black? That black mud layer is anoxic, meaning without oxygen. Mangroves are able to live in anoxic, muddy soils. Why is this mud so low in oxygen? The mud is formed from organic matter, which is basically decomposing stuff made by living things. For example, leftover snail slime, decaying leaves and roots, or crab poop. Bacteria and other microbes love to eat and digest the decaying organic matter. As these little microbes digest, they respire and consume oxygen as well. In the deep mud, there's typically very little oxygen because it's all been used up. Only the top layer of mud exposed to the surface still has oxygen. Once out of oxygen, microbes start to use other elements to process their food, such as sulfur. These bacterial processes produce hydrogen sulfide, which is why this mud smells really bad, like rotten eggs. Since mangroves live in anoxic mud, they have special roots that stick out of the ground to get oxygen. You may be asking, wait a minute, why do plants need oxygen? I thought they used carbon dioxide. And you are right, but plants use both carbon dioxide and oxygen. You probably have learned about photosynthesis, the process where plants use carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight to create sugar, and release oxygen, which helps us breathe. But all plants also need to absorb oxygen to process their food and use it for energy. All of a tree's tissues need oxygen to survive, including the roots. For some terrestrial plants, the soil is porous enough to let oxygen in. Take a look at this fluffy potting mix you might use for gardening. Now compare that to the thick and fine muddy sediment that mangroves live in. Since mangroves live in anoxic mud, the roots need to get oxygen directly from the air and stick out of the ground. This is an example of a mangrove adaptation. An adaptation is something that has evolved over millennia to help an organism survive. It could be a physical attribute or even a behavior. For instance, manta rays have large mouths, a physical adaptation that allows them to filter large quantities of water for food. Here, this manta is in some murkier water that likely contains fish eggs or plankton. Seeking out certain food sources would be a behavioral adaptation. Let's look at the various root structures mangroves have adapted over time. To live in the oxygen-poor mud, the red mangrove has arching prop roots coming from the trunk, as well as drop roots coming down from branches to get oxygen directly from the air. These little dots on the red mangrove roots are called lenticels, and they're basically pores to help the plant exchange gases and get oxygen. The gray mangrove has pencil roots that stick straight up out of the ground. The large-leaved orange mangrove has knobby knee roots, and the black mangrove has these little looping lateral roots. Mangroves also have adaptations that help them deal with living in salt water. Like all plants, mangroves actually need fresh water inside their tissues even though they live surrounded by salty water. When the red mangrove roots absorb seawater, special membranes help act as a filter and keep the salt out. The gray mangrove has a different strategy. It takes in the salt but then excretes it back out. If you were to look closely at this gray mangrove leaf with a powerful microscope, you would find small salt excretion glands with salt crystals. If you were to lick the leaf, it would also taste pretty salty. Plants also work hard to keep that precious fresh water in. When I scratch this leaf from the large-leaved orange mangrove, some white stuff comes off. These leaves have a thick, waxy layer to protect the leaf and keep water in. Not every mangrove is equal in their ability to tolerate salt. The red and gray mangroves are some of the most salt-tolerant, growing at the ocean's edge, and they're often partially submerged underwater. In contrast, the black mangrove is farther up on shore. The nipa palm is also considered a mangrove. Although it lives mostly in freshwater rivers, it's exposed to some saltwater during high tides. Another way to ID mangroves is to look at their propagules and their leaves. Propagules are similar to seeds, but unlike seeds, they already start growing leaves while still attached to the parent tree. The large-leaved orange mangrove has broad green leaves and stout propagules. Mangrove propagules typically float around for a bit until getting trapped in other mangrove roots or eventually sinking into the sediment and starting growth. Red mangroves also have broad, dark green leaves but develop these long string bean-like propagules. Gray mangrove roots have narrower, lighter-colored leaves and smaller propagules that are shaped like pointy lima beans. The black mangrove has narrow, oval-shaped leaves and actually has seeds rather than propagules. These seeds develop from bright red, smaller flowers. Mangrove roots not only look interesting and help the tree survive, they also provide valuable habitat to animals. The roots offer a hard surface for animals like oysters to attach to or for snails to graze on. Small fish also like to hide in between them. Mangroves are considered a nursery habitat for snappers and barracuda. There can be some variation in mangrove habitats. The roots we just looked at are from small mangrove islands or along mangrove fringes, basically narrow bands of mangroves along the shore. However, mangroves also may exist in larger mudflat areas. Mudflats are intertidal areas of deposited sediment without vegetation. The mudflats often host unique and important microbial life. Let's learn more from a student researcher who has studied a specific type of mangrove microbe.
Today, my name is Gabriella Prelosky. I am a fourth-year undergraduate studying general biology at the University of Guam, and I am under the National Science Foundation Seas Includes program. And I am under Dr. Christopher Lobin at the Guam Diatom Collection Microscopy Lab at UOG. Guam itself has a lot of diversity when it comes to mangrove microbes. There's a lot of diatoms, viruses, sulfur-loving bacteria, different algae. Guam itself is just known for having a lot of biodiversity when it comes to mangroves. Diatoms are single-celled algae that live in a silica shell, and they are found anywhere from the smallest drop of water to the smallest fleck of mud. Getting into the lab, I was able to acid clean and spin and create scanning electron microscope and light microscope slides for previous collected yap samples from the Ama'a mangrove. And we were able to look at those underneath the SEM, and I was able to discover 2 new species of diatoms, one that was very poorly described and very rare in most of the samples we have, and one that looks very similar to another diatom species. This is the first research of mangrove diatoms done in the Western Pacific, and we're hoping to find out if they're good water quality indicators and what else they can provide for us. This research project is mostly about, this is the first project of mangrove diatoms done in the Western Pacific, and we're trying to get more information and see if they could be potential water quality indicators, and generally what else they can be used for. They are primary producers and help provide for other microorganisms, which lead up to fish, which lead up to humans, and basically just form an entire food web.
Building on what Gabby said, let's take a look at some of the organisms in the mangrove food web. Many animals, like snails, may graze on diatoms, algae, and microbes on the mud. Some insects and crabs may eat the mangrove leaves. However, most crabs are omnivorous scavengers, and the mangrove mudflats are a feast for them. Large populations of fiddler crabs can be seen grazing by their burrows. Male fiddler crabs are identified by their one large claw that they wave around to attract female crabs. What are they eating? You guessed it, that decaying organic matter is delicious for crabs. They might also eat microscopic plants and animals on the mud surface. And here are some more crabs. While walking in the mangroves, animals are quick to hide in the roots and can be difficult to spot. However, leaving a camera behind for just 20 minutes to take a time lapse showed plenty of activity occurring among the roots. These larger ones farther back are land crabs, also known as punglao. There are also multiple smaller, darker crabs that are great at climbing up the roots. At the very end, a medium-sized crab with red eyes also pops up. With all this crab life, predators will be attracted to the area. When the tide is higher, stingrays cruise the mudflat. With their mouths on the bottom of their flat bodies and crushing mouthparts, stingrays find crabs to be a tasty treat. Along with the incoming tide, mullet can be found swimming along the mangrove roots as well. As the tide falls again and less water remains, you can find small young fish may still swim in the shallow water. Foraging birds such as reef herons, plovers, and other shorebirds may use the mudflats and leave behind characteristic footprints. One of the most exceptional animals in our mangroves is the mud skipper. These fish are a type of goby and can be found hanging out on mangrove roots using special fins that act like a suction cup. They can also twist their bodies and quickly skip away from danger. These remarkable fish can survive out of water by absorbing oxygen through their skin and using specialized chambers near their gills. Mangrove roots provide habitat for fish and wildlife, but they also help keep the coral reefs healthy. Wildfires burn through Guam's forests and grasslands every year, leaving bare patches of land. 100% of these fires are caused by humans. The lack of vegetation means a lack of roots to stabilize the sediment. When it rains, the soil and other pollution can get washed down the hills into the oceans, where it can smother coral. This is called sedimentation. Mangrove roots help capture these sediment particles along the shoreline. When murky water washes into the ocean from the land, it's full of particles from the eroded soils. When this water goes through the mangrove areas, the water slows down because it has to flow between the complex root structure. Slime from animals living in the mangroves like fish and snails help the tiny particles stick together to form larger, heavier particles. These larger particles sink, settling out of the water to the bottom. This can help improve water clarity and quality. A ridge-to-reef approach to coral reef conservation recognizes the importance of the whole system. To protect water quality, we must protect the terrestrial forests, mangroves, and other vegetation which help prevent erosion and absorb pollution. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Pretend you are in this tropical coastal village and families living near the shore have been complaining about their property eroding. They have come to you for help. You are a coastal manager in charge of addressing erosion in your village. Brainstorm different ways you can address the issue, assuming you have an unlimited budget. Pause here and come back when you're ready. Some options you may have come up with include seawalls, rock walls, jetties, beach renourishment, and mangroves or other plants. Seawalls and rock walls are exactly what they sound like. Walls built on the shore high enough that waves won't go over. Jetties are structures perpendicular to the shore, usually made of rock or stone that help reduce energy from waves and currents. Beach renourishment involves taking sediment from an area, often the ocean floor, to replace the beach area that was lost. All of these structures can help address erosion on the coast. However, they all come with issues and may need future repair or replacement. Beach renourishment is often used in popular tourist locations. However, it can be expensive to constantly supply all the sediment every few years. Here's a wave tank created to demonstrate erosion and coastal defense. As you can see, the water motion causes the sand to erode or wash away. Seawalls are a commonly used defense to prevent erosion. Over the years, engineers have also come up with more effective new seawall designs, such as those with the recurved edge on the top, which help direct water back out to sea. Another option you may have guessed is vegetation such as mangroves, represented by these stalks. If you look at the seawall and the mangroves, there is a major difference. The seawall reflects wave energy, whereas the mangroves absorb and reduce the wave's energy. When the wave energy is reflected instead of absorbed, it can actually cause erosion at the base of the seawall. Mangroves not only absorb the waves, they are constantly growing and mostly maintain themselves, unlike seawalls, which need to be repaired. Mangroves may even actively build up the shore by trapping sediment. In Guam, the mangroves along our southern coast are critical for preventing erosion. You can see how close the road is to the water through the mangroves. When mangroves are removed, severe erosion can result. So, although they may cover up the ocean view a bit, it's important to let those mangroves continue to grow and protect them from being cut down. However, mangroves aren't suitable for every environment and shouldn't be planted everywhere. Mangroves are actually invasive in Hawaii, where they were introduced for their proposed benefits. However, the wildlife there is not evolved to use mangroves as a food source, and the mangroves disturb natural fish pond habitats. Despite their importance, mangroves around the world have declined by approximately 35% during the 1990s and have continued to decline into the 2000s. Worldwide, the major cause of mangrove loss is development for agriculture and aquaculture, such as the rise of shrimp aquaculture ponds. Ironically, mangroves are naturally extremely productive nurseries for seafood. Poorly planned aquaculture removes the mangroves and replaces them with inefficient artificial ponds that release lots of excrement and nutrient pollution. The ponds can become sources of pollution when they require use of antibiotics and other artificial chemicals to manage disease in the crowded shrimp ponds. Carefully planning aquaculture that includes mangroves rather than removes them can help address this issue. In Guam, we've lost mangroves due mostly to coastal development, such as buildings and roads. Removal and sea level rise currently threaten our existing mangroves. These photos unfortunately show some mangroves that were illegally cut in marine preserves. Although mangroves are quite hardy, it still may take many years for propagules to settle into the area and grow into mature trees. Another big issue for mangroves in our community is climate change and sea level rise. As the planet warms, glaciers and ice sheets melt and add water to the ocean. Warmer water also expands and takes up more volume. Sea level is expected to rise 1 to 3 feet in Guam within the next century. This might not sound like that much more water, but it can make a big difference for our shoreline and mangrove health. Using this tool from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we can visualize how sea level rise will occur. At 1 foot, it will go this far inland, and at 3 feet, this far. As sea level rises, mangroves can drown if they can't move inland or accumulate enough sediment to elevate themselves. The developments around our coast will also be impacted. Continued modeling of sea level rise, monitoring of the mangroves, and planning will be needed to understand how to help mangroves and our communities adapt in the face of changing sea levels and climate change. One way to reverse this trend of mangrove loss is to use mangrove restoration. Ecological restoration or rehabilitation seeks to return areas of damaged ecosystems close to their original state and return their ecological functions. For mangroves, it may involve restoring water channels to better balance fresh and saltwater flow. For instance, this group of women in Indonesia broke apart the walls of an old shrimp pond and dug channels in carefully planned areas. With proper water flow, the mangroves naturally returned. If the area is suitable, planting propagules or seedlings can also help restore the area more rapidly. These young seeds were planted in Malesso a little over a year ago and are surviving and taking root. Ecological restoration, whether it's for mangroves, coral reefs, forests, or other ecosystems, is a science and involves using a lot of different types of information. Pretend you are a restoration scientist. Here are 4 types of mangroves and some facts about them. You have enough time and resources to grow 100 trees, assuming we already worked out the techniques to do so. What trees do you plant? You can divide the 100 up evenly between the 4 species, choose all of one species, or any combination in between. Discuss with a friend and come back when you're ready. So there's no right answer to this. It depends on your particular goals. If you want to increase the amount of available habitat and maximize wave absorption, you may want to choose the red mangrove, which has really large root structures. If you want to enhance the ability of the mangrove forest to survive in uncertain conditions due to climate change, you may choose the gray mangrove for its hardiness. If you want to prevent local extinction of rare species and increase diversity, you may focus on some of the rare or threatened species. Or if you're limited by time and effort, you may choose species that are easy to collect and grow. Sometimes scientists try to do a little bit of everything because they are unsure of the future of climate change or other threats. Scientists, natural resource managers, and other organizations often discuss together how to best manage time and money for restoration or other conservation initiatives. Many other scientific factors are also important, such as the location in the intertidal zone, proximity to rivers, and ensuring the spread of genetic diversity. Usually, scientists will take seeds from multiple trees rather than just a few to increase genetic diversity. Understanding social factors is also crucial, such as the ownership of the land that the mangroves are planted on. It is also important to understand why mangroves were removed. Was it for firewood, to create beach access, or for some other reason? By understanding why, we can work with different community groups to address the root issue and come up with sustainable solutions. For instance, alternative livelihoods can help ensure people have economic incentives to keep mangroves around. Some groups have started beekeeping in the mangroves or ecotourism businesses. Environmental justice is also important to ensure that we are taking into account the voice and values of the local community, and that benefits of mangroves are enjoyed equitably. Now it's time for you to explore yourself. Next time you pass by the mangroves on the southern coast or at Pearl Harbor, try to see if you can ID the trees and explore and find the different wildlife in the mangrove habitat. Kayaking is a great way to explore the mangroves and the life that they hold above and below the water. Help ensure future generations continue enjoying the benefits of mangroves by letting these unique and valuable trees continue to grow. If you'd like to learn more, check in with the Guam Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Statistics and Plans, or follow the Guam Coral Reef Initiative Facebook page for updates.
Hafa students, I'm Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. For more than a year now, you all have continued to wash your hands and watch your distance from others, and you've done a really great job wearing your masks. We know your parents and guardians have helped you to make these changes to keep yourself and your community safe. As Governor Leon Guerrero said, we are happy you are here. We want you to continue to learn and sharpen your skills with the help of PBS University. This program is the result of a collaborative effort. We couldn't do it alone. I'd like to thank the teachers and support staff of the Guam Department of Education and PBS Guam for their work and their commitment to our students. I'd also like to thank you students for participating at home. To your parents, I'd like to thank you for taking an active role in your child's education. We are all eager to return to a time when all of us can share and study together in person. Until then, we hope you learned something new from this PBS University instruction.